Last week I milled up a little framing molding out of reclaimed Douglas fir, and since then I've made a few spline frames, and today I'm going to show you a really simple shellac finish. And one of the nice things about shellac is it dries really fast. But there's one or two things that you should know about shellac, and one of them is shellac has a shelf life. So for that reason I never buy shellac pre-mixed at the hardware store or the home store. I mix my own shellac, and it's really simple. The first thing you'll need to do is buy shellac flakes, and just do a Google search for shellac flakes, and a whole bunch of answers or places where you can get shellac will come up. And then the other thing is there's a couple different colors of shellac. You have a garnet lac, which I'm going to use today, which is very dark. There's an orange shellac, which is very popular. And then if you don't want a lot of color, there's a blonde shellac, which is almost clear. So first thing I'm going to do is show you my recipe. But before we get started, I want to tell you about this week's paintings that are up for auction. They're both daffodils, and they're both framed in the Douglas fir spline frames from the molding that I milled last week. If you want to check out the auction, there'll be a link in the description. This is what the shellac flakes look like, and I'll take this and dump it right into my plastic container. Always use a plastic container or a glass container. Don't use a metal container. Next I'll add denatured alcohol, and a good recipe is 1/3 shellac flakes and 2/3 denatured alcohol. And I'm just doing this by eye, I'm not really measuring it. And that looks good. Next I'll stir this up, and then I'll put it to the side for a few hours and let the shellac flakes dissolve. I mixed a little up yesterday so I can keep working, and I guess an important thing to talk about is the different applicators that you'll use to apply the shellac. I have a brush that I use, and I keep this brush in a plastic container with just a little bit of denatured alcohol in it, and I'll use this until the nap of the brush gets kind of nasty looking. Then I have an applicator that I've made, and I keep this in a plastic container with the lid on with a little alcohol in the container, and that makes this usable for a really long time. I've used these for more than a year in some cases. So before we go any further, let's go ahead and make one of these applicators, and for this you'll need an old t-shirt. Take your old t-shirt and cut it into about a 12-inch square, and then take some fabric from the t-shirt, just about the size of a handball, maybe a little smaller. Put it in the center here and roll it up. And basically, I feel like I want more fabric in the center. I'm going to add a little bit more. And then use a little tape. Painter's tape works good. Masking tape. Once you've got it taped up, cut away the extra material. Now I'm ready to apply the shellac. I've got some gloves on my hand because I'm going to be handling the frame. And the first thing I do is use the paintbrush. I'll dip that in the shellac and seal the inside of the frame. Next I'll apply the shellac to the outside of the frame. Now I'm using the applicator to blend the shellac in. If you're wondering why I needed to use the brush, it's hard to get into the inside corners with the applicator. Okay, so you can see how I use the brush to kind of wash on a thin coat of shellac, and then I quickly followed it with the applicator to make sure that I was able to blend in any runs or high spots of the shellac. And that's the good thing about the applicator. It has alcohol and shellac on it, so the alcohol is dissolving any of the high spots. And I continue to use the applicator just blending the shellac in for maybe 5 minutes till I feel like it looks good. And now I'll set the frame to the side, let it dry for about an hour, give it a light sanding, and then do the same thing again. But this time I don't need to use the brush. I can just focus on the outside of the frame and the face of the frame. And then for the most part, the frame is done other than giving it a hand rub finish with a wax or some kind of a buffing paste. Okay, well, it's been about an hour and I've got an old piece of 220 sandpaper. I'm not using a new piece because I don't want it to be that abrasive, and I'll lightly sand the outside and the face of the frame. I'm removing the dust with a clean paper towel. And next I'll put my gloves on and add another coat of shellac. It's been about another hour, hour and a half, and the shellac is dry, and now I'm going to polish the finish. I'm using the raw linseed oil and beeswax polish made by Lynn at the Darburn Orber channel, and I've never used this before as a polish, so I'm looking forward to that. I'll use 4-0 steel wool, put a little polish on the steel wool, and rub in the direction of the grain. Now I'm using a paper towel to remove any of the residue left from the polish. And the frame has a really nice soft feel to it and just a beautiful look. It's a great finish. That being said, it's great for a frame. I wouldn't use a shellac finish like this on, say, something like a kitchen table. At least not in my house, because I've got 4 kids and they would just destroy it in no time. But for a frame, because it's really not getting used, it just has such a nice look to it, and it would be a shame to put a polyurethane finish on something like this. So a couple of things. I did make a painting for this frame. I made this painting this morning, and it's a painting of Huber Woods, and I'll have a link to an auction for this painting in the description. And if you want to know more about this furniture polish, I'll put a link to Lynn's channel also in the description. And if you like this video, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, and I'd really love it if you'd share my videos. And also follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon.